Welcome to episode 22 with Rick Howard, Chief Security Officer, Palo Alto Networks.
But let me tell you why Alan Turing is so fantastic. He is a genius, okay? Let's just figure that out right away. He proved mathematically that it was possible to build a computer years before we had the technology to build it. He's the guy that figured out and proved it mathematically, that you can put a set of symbols into a machine and make it do one thing today and put a different set of symbols into it the next day and make it do something completely different. And what do I mean by that? It means that he is the guy that proved that you could right now play World of Warcraft with all of your friends across the world, and then shut that off and bring up a spreadsheet with enough data in it the size of your local library. He's the guy that proved that can be done mathematically, okay? Like 6 or 7 years before we built the first one. So he's a genius. So then he's so smart, and he's he's a puzzle solver. He migrated over to Bletchley Park during World War II to help the British break the German codes. He's the guy that helped build the machine that broke the Enigma encryption machine that the Germans used to send all their message traffic during the war. Enigma is this mechanical machine with lots of dials that the Germans used to encode all their messages. He helped build a machine that broke that code. Okay, so probably reduced World War II by 2 years, probably saved 20 million lives because of the work that he did there. Phenomenal achievement. But it was so secret that only like 3, 4, or 5 people in the world knew what they were doing. What they were doing at Bletchley Park, that no one knew the work that he did it.
Hello, and you are listening to Bill Murphy's Red Zone podcast. If you are listening for the first time, I interview leaders who inspire me in the areas of hardcore IT security, IT business leadership, innovation, creativity, entrepreneurship, and fearless living principles. Welcome to the show. Welcome back to the show, everybody. This is Bill Murphy, your host of the Red Zone podcast. Today, I interviewed Rick Howard, who is the CISO of Palo Alto Networks. Rick also reports to the CEO of Palo Alto, which is important because that's a rarity to have the information security officer reporting directly to the CEO. But this is a shift that's happening, and Rick talks about it and his firm belief that the chief information security officer should not report to the CIO. So if you are a CIO listening, this is good to hear a potentially contrarian opinion that you may hold, to just understand the other side of the argument. We cover why you should assume you've been hacked and what that changes in your decision making. Also, very important, understanding the 6 kill chain fundamentals. Why? Because you need to know where your team is as it relates to these fundamentals. So I think from a high level, it's good for the decision makers to understand this. Also, we cover the 7 must ask improve questions the CIO or the CISO must ask about their Next Gen Firewall. How you can deny command and control attacks. Also, we review books, we review videos, movies. Rick was a big founder of the Cybersecurity Canon, which is basically the Hall of Fame for cybersecurity books. It's really fun, and you'll enjoy that part of the conversation. Also, how you scale security by real cooperation between security companies. Rick is deeply involved with some of the top security companies in the world as the CEOs of these companies are developing sharing methods so that we can scale cyber security threat defense. It's very difficult. Well, it's impossible to scale auditors. We know that. It's because this is possible to scale people. How do we scale cooperation so that we could really have a much more amplified effect on protecting the businesses that we work with? We also talk about Alan Turing, which was really awesome because we learned how and why Alan Turing is why he should be seen as a hero, and some of the unfortunate events that led to him not being seen as one. Also, the beginning of AI and security, we cover that as well. So with that, let's move into the program. Instead of having a sponsor for this episode, I'd like to give you direct access to each episode summary, which includes my guest biography information, recommendations to their books, ways to contact them, their insights and thoughts, all delivered right to your inbox. So that you don't even have to remember to go to my show page at Red Zone or to my blog site at LinkedIn. Normally, I post all of the information on one of those two sites, but personally, I find it helpful just to get an update sent to my email. And I hope you do too. So go to redzonetech.net/Bill. Again, that's redzonetech.net/Bill to sign up today. And I'll get you on the immediate access to all of the episode summaries as soon as the shows are released. Have a great day. So welcome to the show, Rick. I appreciate you for carving out some time for me today.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
So the evolution of the Chief Information Security Officer, this is not a very old role in the span of American business, is it?
It's not. Commercial businesses really haven't seen the CISO for just over, 5, 10, that's about 15 years, maybe 20 years now.
How do you see the evolution of the CISO role evolving? Like, where do you see it going as compared to where it has been and where we are right now? What do you see the next couple of years looking like?
Well, that's a great question, the one that all of us are talking about. And in order to understand that, you kind of have to understand where we came from. And I did a little bit of research on this to prepare for a different talk, and it turns out that the modern business was invented back in the 1920s, 1930s by a guy by the name of Alfred P. Sloan. You may remember his name. He's famous for being part of the Sloan School of Business. He's that Sloan, and he was the CEO of General Motors back in the day and getting his butt handed to him by Ford. He had about 9 different car lines at the time, and he was trying to manage all of those at the very top with a very small staff, and was about ready to go bankrupt when he invented the idea of pushing down profit and loss responsibility to general managers for each of the products, so like Oldsmobile and Cadillac and all those kinds of things. And he's the guy that invented sales dashboards and compensating salesmen based on how good they sell their product, and all of those things that we just accept as part of business. He invented all that stuff back in the 20s and 30s. And in about 10 years, he overtook Ford, and he never got behind him again in his entire career. And he was the CEO of General Motors up until the 60s, I think. But that was the invention of the modern corporation, general managers with P&L responsibility. That started to change in 1980s when CEOs decided they could get a better bang for their belt if they started bringing on technical executives. And by technical, I mean specialists. That's when we started inventing chief financial officers and chief marketing officers and chief operating officers, people with a very specific skill set to handle a very specific thing. And that's when we got the first CIO. The first CIO came on board in like 1985. 2 companies brought them on. I think it was Bank of America and American Airlines. And even Newsweek magazine proclaimed that new C-level executive as being the great innovator for the modern corporation. But we did not see a CISO until 10 years later. Citicorp hired the first one in response to a pretty public cyber attack by a Russian cybercrime organization. And their leaders thought they needed a CISO to kind of handle the security operations of that bank. But what happened after that, all the technical people that used to do all the IT and networking and even a little bit of security, they're the ones that got promoted into the CISO role. And, like most of my peers, we came up through the technical ranks. So we understand networks and ones and zeros and all that stuff, but really don't know how to talk to the executive suite in terms of business. We still think it's a pretty cool idea to take a spreadsheet of all the vulnerabilities that we found in the last scan and take it up to the boss and say, see what we found. And that doesn't really work too much. The CEO is going to say, get the hell out of my office when he sees something like that. So after, a couple of years of doing those kinds of things, the CEO said, you know what, they're all technical. Let's get them under the CIO. And that's where kind of the CISOs have been placed, for the last 15 years or so. One of the things I get to do in my job is go all over the world and talk to security organizations about how they do security. And I would guess about 75% of the people that, or the organizations I have visited have the CISO tucked under the CIO in terms of organizational structure. Is that your experience too, Bill, or do you see something different?
No, that actually is my experience. However, I've had some interesting talks. It is random. Well, I wouldn't say it's random, but I am seeing some organizations that are a bit more sophisticated, understanding that maybe it could be under audit or be under some other areas organizationally. Where do you think ultimately the right fit is for the CISO to be reporting through?
Yeah, I have a pretty strong opinion to this, and I realize I'm out on a limb on this because most of us don't do it this way. But I absolutely, first, the fundamental thing is that CISOs should not report to CIOs, because I think there needs to be an honest tension between the two organizations. And the CIO office needs to innovate for the company to bring in more revenue, and the CISO needs to make sure that he does it securely, okay? And it shouldn't come down to a decision by one person to pick innovation versus security. It shouldn't be one person's decision to do that. There should be a healthy tension between those two ideas. And for the most part, those two organizations, if they're peers, can work that out between themselves. And in the off chance they can't, there should be one person to go to make the decision. And in my mind, that's either the CEO or the chief operating officer, because those guys own the risk of the business. So if we can't agree, then you would say, boss, here's the innovation we want to do. Here's the risk it poses to your organization. Here's what we can do to mitigate it, but you decide to mitigate that or eat the risk and nobody else. So I would like to see it done that way. And I think that's the way it's going to be when it all shakes out, 5-10 years down the road. You agree, or am I off?
I agree. That is my observation as well. I feel the maturity. I'm slipping on the dates, but I think you said the CIO sort of entered into our awareness mid-'80s, and the CISO role, I think you said there's some pockets probably late 90s, but mostly, I don't know where I read 2004, but you're saying right in the late 90s, the CISO starting to hit the street en masse. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, within the first one hit around 1995, and then they all kind of started getting tucked in the CIO organization after that. I think after a couple of years after that.
So it's just not very mature. I mean, compared to the organizational maturity of it's almost 100 years old. Alfred Sloan, sort of the traditional business structure, has almost an 80 to 100-year head start.
Exactly. So that's one thing. I think going down the line, we're going to see that as the way it kind of morphs out. And here's an interesting exercise you can do. Go to the management pages of your favorite companies, all right, and see where they list the CIO or the CSO or the CISO. All right. Most companies still don't even list those guys as part of their management team. And when they do, okay, they mostly just list the CIO. You rarely see a CSO or a CISO listed as part of the leadership team. And I think that's a kind of a change in culture we have to do with our executives, is convince them that we need to be part of the management team driving the company forward.
I would agree with that. When you were out talking, so you're with Palo Alto and you are the CISO with them. How does that role, are you customer facing? Are you internal facing? And then how does that role play out with your own CIO and your own CTO within Palo Alto?
I do a little bit of both. I got one foot on each side of that lane. On the internal side, I have oversight of the physical security team and the cyber team. There are other people that do the day-to-day stuff, but I'm kind of the umbrella guy that takes a last look at it. And on the public-facing side, I'm also in charge of the threat intelligence team that we have at Palo Alto Networks that we call Unit 42. And that is an outward-facing intelligence team, taking the data that our product collects from our customers, making sense of it, and kind of helping customers understand threats in different ways. So those are my two main jobs. And I guess the third one is just kind of, thought leadership stuff, going out and speaking at conferences. That's where you and I met at RSA. And, going out and talking to customers about, not about Palo Alto security per se, but just security in general. I've been doing that for about 2 years. And I have to say, I feel like I have a master's degree in that now, because everybody does it differently and everybody has good reasons to do it differently. And I feel like my eyes have been opened.
I would agree with that. I think it's having you in that thought leadership role is, I think, very powerful, because you're kind of hitting topics that are important for organizational structures and awareness, and sort of helping them with your thoughts and opinions on and how they should be structured, because that impacts their security posture greatly. What about Cybersecurity Canon? Let's talk about books for a second. So this was fascinating because one of your talks was about how you built this organization that really promotes the best books that should be read by the profession and by leaders in the profession. Could you talk a little bit about that, with the genesis of it, and maybe give us a few suggestions that listeners where they should start and what they should be reading?
Thanks for asking that question, because I really love this topic. We're really fortunate that Palo Alto kind of sponsors it. So let me take you back a couple of years to how this all got started. Like you, and we love our profession, and one of the reasons I love it so much is that it changes all the time. There's something new you have to understand every couple of days. So it's very exciting. But what I hate about it is, it changes all the time, and you always have to read everything. You can never keep up. So it's always a pain in the rear end to stay current. So like most of us, I have a stack of cybersecurity books that I've read in my career. And I was down in my basement admiring my bookshelf of those things a couple of years ago. And I'm feeling very superior because I know I've read all these books, and I know a lot of my peers have not. So I'm patting myself on the back. And one day I was down there and I pulled one of those books off the shelf. And you know what? I couldn't remember one thing in that book, even though I knew I read it. I recognized the cover. I couldn't remember any of the salient features that author was trying to convey. So as a personal project to myself, I decided to reread some of those more important ones and try to write some notes down so I can remember it, later on as I get into my old age. Those little notes turn into book reviews that I put on my own personal blog page called Break. And after about a year or so, I got about 25 of these book reviews done. And I went to the RSA conference in San Francisco 2 years ago with a collection of those book reviews and said, you know what, some of these books are things that we all should have read by now as a professional learning kind of capability. And it was well received. And then what happened, which made this fantastic, is that Palo Alto Network decided to sponsor it. So here's what they've done. We have created a rock and roll Hall of Fame, or if you're a sports guy, a baseball Hall of Fame for cybersecurity books. We have a committee, and this year's committee is 10 strong, all security thought leaders in their own right, not part of Palo Alto, but they're in charge of picking the books from the candidate list that I presented at RSA 2 years ago to be inducted into the Canon. So like I said, about 25 or so books that I listed first, and then every year the committee says, here are 2 or 3 that we want to put in to be official members of this Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for cybersecurity books. And what a great thing this is for me to do. I get so much pleasure out of it, because what we do is we go out to our customer conference in April every year and bring out the authors that win. And I get to interview them on stage. I get to give them the award. I get to talk to them and put them on video. I mean, it's just so much fun for me. And I think it shows provides a lot of benefit to the community. So books that have won in the last 2 years are Parmi Olson's We Are Anonymous. In my mind, still the best book about hacktivists that are out there. And then last year we inducted 4 books. One of my favorites, Cuckoo's Egg from 1989 from Clifford Stoll. Winning as a CISO, which dovetails nicely what we were just talking about the evolution of the CISO, written by Richard Bayich. He is the Wells Fargo CISO these days. And then Spam Nation by Brian Krebs, and Countdown to Zero Day by Ken Zetter. And minus Clifford Stoll, who could not come out to the ceremony, all those other authors came out last year to receive the award, and I got to interview them on camera. It was fantastic.
It really is fantastic, and it does get me fired up because it is a lot of fun, and it's classy that Palo Alto stepped up to sponsor that. That it's very, very cool. And that was funny. I was reading through one of your presentations, and it was The Practice of Network Security Monitoring, the book by the author Richard Baylich.
Baylich, yes.
And what was interesting is there was a comment that you made. It's become smarter to operate as though your enterprise is always compromised. Now, I can't remember, was that his quote or is that your quote?
That is absolutely his quote, and I agree with him totally. He's taken that idea from the original Kill Chain paper by Lockheed Martin that came out around 2010. Because until that paper was published, we were all in the defense in depth mode, perimeter defense, where we thought we failed if a bad guy got into your perimeter somehow. What the Lockheed Martin paper did, the kill chain paper did, was change the assumption around. It changed the assumption to be, what if they're already in your network? What do you do differently if you make that assumption? Right, and that's where Richard was getting that from, and that's when the industry really changed. Okay, that's when the commercial industry really changed to understanding the tracking of the adversaries down the kill chain. Because just because the bad guy delivers some piece of malware and even installs it and even establishes command and control back to get more instructions, that adversary still has not accomplished his mission yet. And they still haven't done any damage to you yet. It is until he does the last step, which is, steal your credit cards or your intellectual property or do damage on your network, whatever that is. It isn't until that adversary does that they accomplish their mission. And so what Richard is pushing for in his book, and I totally agree with this, is that there are things you can do to prevent that guy from accomplishing their mission. And his book is fantastic about laying all that out and giving you open source tools to kind of practice at your house if you want to do all that kind of thing.
What I find is interesting, though, and maybe this is just a big, at RSA, most of the companies are fairly massive compared to sort of the medium market and the small. And I find that when I bring this concept up in the small to medium market, kind of sub 10,000 employees, I find a lot of people nod their head, yes, that's a great approach to assume you have been breached. It changes your mentality into how you handle it. Yet I don't think that people are prepared to actually convey that to the business and what that means to them and how that makes them smarter or better with doing that. So how would you make that transition?
Well, I think it's really hard. I mean, in my career, I built these systems from scratch so that you can put security controls at each point in the kill chain and, collect the data so that you know if the adversary is coming down the kill chain. But it's really hard to do. If you have a point, because what most people have done until just recently is they buy point products for each of these things in the kill chain. And in my experience, you pay for a point product, a point security product 3 times. You pay for it when you buy the box. You pay for it when you have to have a guy maintain the box. That means just keeping it running. And you pay for it when you have to have a person on your staff that understands how to read the data. So 3 different times. That is an expensive proposition, and only the high-end organizations could really do that. And by high-end, I mean people with lots of resources, and by lots of resources, I'm talking about Department of Defense or the intelligence community and or the financial community. But everybody else, including Palo Alto, we don't have the resources to dedicate to that kind of thing. And so what evolved, I believe, is the industry vendors are starting to give us platforms that do that kind of work for us, okay? In fact, all the firewall vendors have versions of this, okay? Palo Alto has one, but all of our competitors do too, and you should absolutely go find them. What that means is that one platform itself is doing everything by placing controls in that kill chain where you don't have to do it yourself. So you're buying one box and you're buying one staff that knows all that stuff, and it's a lot cheaper, and you don't have to have as many bodies doing it. At my last job, I was a CISO of a government contractor, and I had 20 people in the SOC, and we had 14 different point products on 4 different networks. It was really expensive. We found bad guys, but it was really hard to do. At Palo Alto, I have a very small staff, and I can do that with a very low cost. I'm very happy with my security profile. I'm not saying I don't have gaps. I'm just saying that these tools are the tools for everybody else, and I'm glad to see it finally hitting the market.
So can I ask you a couple questions about this kill chain concept?
Yeah.
So I want to understand if we can just talk about some nuts and bolts related to kill chain, because I think people listening to this, whether they're using Palo Alto or a variety of the other firewall products, it would be interesting. What questions would you ask to make sure that you've acquired the right modules or acquired the right capabilities or have the right, what would lead one to know that they have those 3 elements of the kill chain covered?
What questions did you ask the vendor if you got all that stuff? You have the ability to do all those things?
Correct.
Well, I mean, this is a basic level, all right? If you think about what bad guys have to do, the original kill chain paper says there's 6 things, and other people have modified that notion. Some are a lot longer, some are a lot shorter, but let's go back to the original paper. First thing a bad guy does is recon your network, define weaknesses. The second thing the adversary does is build a weapon that leverages those weaknesses. then they must deliver it, then they must install it, and then once they've installed it, they've sort of established a beachhead in your network. Okay, so they own a endpoint on your network. Once they've done that, they usually reach out back to the internet to get command and control established, meaning so that they can control that machine through lots of different means, and to provide it more instructions to accomplish the mission that they came there to do in the first place. That initial beachhead has nothing to do with trying to accomplish their mission other than gaining foothold in your network. So after they've done all of those things, then they can do the thing they came there to do in the first place. So what controls do you put in place to prevent them from working their way down the kill chain? I think the first thing you want to do is look at next generation firewall technology. And again, this is not Palo Alto specific. Every firewall vendor has this. And I'm finding as I go around the world talking to people that most people don't realize the power that's there. Because in the old firewalls, that's stateful inspection firewalls, we blocked by port protocol and IP address. And back in the 90s when we invented those things, okay, that was a perfectly reasonable thing to do. But today it's just this big blunt tool, okay? It's a big hammer that we use to block really known bad guys and has no flexibility whatsoever. Next generation technology changes the model, right? So it is, you block it on applications tied to the authenticated user. Think about what that means for a second. In that world, we're not talking about IP addresses anymore. We're talking about applications that employees use. And if you can see that on your network, you can absolutely define rules as a company policy that, by the way, is easy to read in English as opposed to what it is when you're trying to block IP addresses and ports and those kinds of things. So here's the example. When you see someone on your network using Facebook, it's not a MAC address or an IP address using MAC somewhere in your network. It's Rick Howard using Facebook because we've tied those two things together. And as a company policy, you could say Rick has no authority to go to Facebook. In fact, we only want the marketing team to go to Facebook, and that's a one-line entry in your firewall policy. Okay. Now, like I said, all the vendors have a version of this, and they all do it differently, but you should absolutely take a look at moving over to next generation technology, because for the first time in my career, all right, I can logically segment the network at the firewall level. And I've tried to do this with lots of third-party apps, and I've tried to do it with networking gear, with DLANs and all that stuff, and it can be done, but it's really hard and really complicated. This makes it a lot easier to do for the rest of us who don't have some big resources. Okay, so that's the first thing. Any questions about next-gen firewall technology? That's the first thing I would recommend doing.
And I think you had a great point there, is that I don't think people have an idea of the true power of these, because many times I'll go in and we talk about them and they don't have the services turned on. So it's essentially just a layer 3-4 big hammer. They've basically turned these incredibly smart, powerful engines into layer 3-4 firewalls. If they're not applying,
it's a huge frustration, right, to the sales guys and to all firewall makers, I'm sure. So here's what happens. What you said is absolutely right. Some sales guy will come into a group, an organization, and say, I need to tell you about next-gen firewall technology, and they convince them that it's the right thing to do. So they spend $1 gazillion and they forklift their old firewalls out and put these new ones in, and then have no resources left over to plan for the transition to adopt the new technology. So they just turn all the old stuff on. That is hugely frustrating to me, and I'm sure to them, and they should absolutely not do that. So what we recommend people right away is save some of that bucket of money that you have so you can plan for a transition to a new way to do things, and you can actually implement it as the device gets there.
Yeah, and just because of the nature of the command and control piece, I love the way you explain the kill chain, because I think that's even at the higher levels, even if you don't understand all of the technology components of the firewall, when they're going to make decisions, is being able to ask, what are we doing about these command and control functions? Because these darn firewalls are so smart that they can actually apply inspection services to outbound traffic. But so many of the companies that my experience, I'm not sure about yours, Rick, they're turning off outbound inspection. So it's like free for all heading out, which is exactly what we don't want, because the command and control is going out.
Right, and that's a key component to the kill chain model, right? We have to watch for traffic leaving the networks, especially command and control traffic. And let me tell you about this. What's the beauty of a next-gen philosophy is that in that world, everything's an application. So if a new command and control channel opens up that you've never seen before, by default, that is an unknown application, and by default in the firewall policy, you can block all unknown applications. So any new command and control channel that's established can get defeated immediately, and that's hugely, hugely powerful. So you were asking about other controls on the kill chain. You need some way to inspect files being delivered into your network. So we have the Palo Alto product called Wildfire, but the other one that everybody knows is FireEye. Basically, the firewall grabs every document, drops it into a sandbox, and inspects it for malicious behavior. And if it's malicious, we block it, and if it's not, we let it through. All right, so you need some kind of service like that. The other one is an IPS inline, so that you can look for recon activity and any kinds of other indicators of compromise that the bad guy leaves as traces as he skates through your network. Okay. For command and control activity, we need some sort of URL filter so we can tell when the bad guys reach back out, and maybe even some passive DNS filtering going on there too to prevent that kind of thing. And the last most important thing, you absolutely need to be on the endpoint, okay, watching bad guy behavior down there, because that's where the action is. And one of the things our industry has really screwed it up, and I think in the last decade, is to insist that the protections of our endpoint are separate from the protections we put on the network, that they are separate and distinct, and they are absolutely not. They are all tied together. So what you're looking for then is a system of systems that ties all of these services together and informs each other. You don't want to have individual products doing their thing on their own. You want them to inform all the other products that you have in the kill chain whenever they find new activity, right? And I spent my career trying to do that myself. And in fact, the dirty secret in the security vendor community is that we have put that responsibility on the customer. We don't provide those. We haven't traditionally provided those services to them as a way to make some money. And that's what's changed in this platform approach. Whatever platform you buy from whatever vendor, they are starting to take that out of the hands of the customer and doing it themselves, because they've written the code to make all those things talk to each other.
I agree with you. I think the complexity, I think the intention of the vendors is very powerful and right on point, but I think the complexity really overwhelms most teams, and certainly in the small to medium market, 100 to 10,000 employees or so. It's overwhelming even the biggest teams. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having problems to begin with. One of the questions I've thought, what about artificial intelligence? I mean, is there a point in the future where you think that AI, as much as AI sort of has its down detractors, do you think there's a way to apply AI to sort of help tie this together so we get a smart kind of overseer that's able to watch all these moving parts?
Yeah, I think, and we're doing it right now. I mean, this isn't in the future sometime. All the vendors have a rudimentary automated function here and so let me give you an example. Bad guy sends a phishing email into your network. The system peels off the document. It sends it up to the cloud. It finds out that it's malicious. It has some sort of malware in it. Then that system updates the signatures for all the other customers on the network about that one piece of malicious code. So yes, maybe that one got in, but it will never get in again on any of the other customers. And that kind of rudimentary correlation across the system is already being done, has been being done for the last couple of years. So the question I think I hear you saying is, could we do more artificial intelligence? And I think yes is the answer, but I really don't have a sense of where that is going in the future. I'm an old cyber intelligence guy, and I really believe you have to have a human in the loop somewhere to do the analysis, okay? And what I mean by analysis, I don't mean pulling malcode apart. You can automate a lot of that already. What I mean, though, is really understanding the adversary in the aggregate, understanding how that adversary worms his way through the kill chain, right? So I think only a human at this point, and I see that in the near future, say within the next 20 years, can understand that if an adversary leaves 2,500 indicators of compromise in his wake as they try to accomplish their mission, I think only a human is going to be good at lumping all that together and assigning it to a campaign And what I mean by campaign, I'm not talking about attribution here. I don't really care as a network defender who the bad guy is. I just need to understand how that bad guy strings together his process in order to accomplish his mission. Through the recon, through the building of the weapon, through the delivery, through the installation, through the command and control, and through what finally accomplishes his mission. If I can understand all of those traces he leaves behind and put controls in place up and down the kill chain, that's about as much attribution as I need. Maybe some context, maybe things like I need to know that it's a cyber espionage campaign that likes to steal M&A documents from retail organizations. If I knew at least that much, I could tell the customers that they would have some information to take to their boards to let them know what was going on inside their networks. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It does. I love the vision of the vendors, and the human element clearly has to be used today to really do that analytics. I totally agree with you on the human side, and possibly outsourcing some of that. Really, I think the opportunity is for a lot of people is outsourcing basically the hooded sweatshirts, looking at those smaller breadcrumbs for kill chain evidence. My hope in the future is that we can get to a point where a lot of this is automated. But
let me tell you what we're working on, okay? Because we are trying to accomplish that right now, okay? It is a big, hairy idea. I'm not saying we're going to accomplish it because there's lots of hurdles in front of us. But man, if this works, this could change the game, and I'm not trying to oversell it. My boss, I work for the CEO, okay, and like in our previous discussion, this is unique in the industry. I think not too many CSOs work for the CEO, and I feel very fortunate that I have that arrangement. A couple of years ago, his name is Mark McLaughlin. He's been the CEO of Palo Alto Networks for about 3-4 years now. He decided about a year ago that all this idea of intelligence and trying to keep it within our own company is kind of silly. So that's a really dumb idea, that we should not all be spending lots of money on collecting our own intelligence. He said we should all have the same intelligence. And the important thing is what we do with it. Okay? Does that make sense? It's not that the intelligence you collect that makes you an important security vendor. It's how you apply it to your products that is the most important thing. Now, he did up in front of the crowd, and security crowd, and said that everybody claps and thinks that's great that a CEO can have those advanced thoughts. But you know what he did? He convinced 3 other CEOs to go along with him. So it's us, Symantec, it's Intel McAfee, and Fortinet formed a thing called the Cyber Threat Alliance, where we have been sharing threat information with each other for the past year. Okay, and this is something that security vendors do not do or have not done in the past. We've always considered threat intelligence our, intellectual property, and we're not going to give it away. And we've always tried to sell it in some fashion, right? But these 4 CEOs have decided this is something to try. So the Cyber Threat Alliance is unique compared to, say, other information sharing organizations like the ISACs. Are you familiar with the ISACs, Bill?
Certainly.
The ISACs formed in 1998, 1999. President Bill Clinton directed that all the critical infrastructure verticals should get together and share threat information with each other. He didn't give them any resources, didn't give them any money, but he said you should do it because it's the right thing to do. The ISAC that emerged as probably the best one early on was the financial sector ISAC, because those folks realized early on how important it was. And the other ones have taken longer to get going. But so everybody points to the financial sector ISAC as the ISAC to emulate because they are so far ahead of the crowd. I think you can point to the defense industrial base too. Those folks, for other reasons, have discovered that it's important to share threat information, even though they're competitors. All right. So what makes this Cyber Threat Alliance different than the ISAC? There's 2 real main differences, right? The first one is you have to give as much as you get. There are no lurkers in the Cyber Threat Alliance. You have to provide as much intelligence as you collect. That's not the way it is in the ISACs. You can be a consumer of intelligence. You never have to give anything if you don't want to. So that's the first big difference. The second big difference is whatever the other members of the alliance give me in terms of intelligence, I dump it right into the Palo Alto product and vice versa. If they find some new piece of malware that I've never seen before, that goes right into the Palo Alto product. And if I give them some new piece of malware, it's the same thing. They dump it right into their product. So that's a very interesting idea. And it's taken us about a year and some months to get to trust each other. right? Because, we don't like each other, usually because we're competitors, right? And to build some infrastructure so that we can automate the information sharing. So we've done that. We've been doing that for about a year now, okay? And we brief the founding CEOs about every 4 or 5 months to, give them an update on where we are. And so now it's just last month, and we gave them a briefing, and, we're stable now. We're sharing about 1,000 pieces of unique malcode a day as a proof of concept that it can be done. Now, that's not a lot. I know that because, at Palo Alto, we collect, 20 million unique samples of malicious code a week. And we're not even one of the big guys. The AV guys collect way more than we do. So sharing 1,000 pieces of malcode a day is not that big of a deal. But it allowed us, like I said, to establish trust and to build some infrastructure. So the question the founding CEOs wanted to have answered at this meeting was, what are we going to do with this thing? Okay, is this all we're going to do, or should we shut it down? Should we keep it going? And so here's what we told them. So what we want to do is focus on sharing not malicious code, but adversary campaign information the way I just described it with the kill chain. We want to share campaign information in real time with all the members of the Cyber Threat Alliance. And I think that we're going to reach a tipping point of members. And I believe that number is anywhere from 25 to 50 members in the alliance. But if we get enough of them in the alliance, that every organization that connects to the internet will have at least one of us in their network protecting their networks. When we reach that point, and we are sharing the controls necessary to block all the adversary campaigns in real time, okay, that is a powerful, powerful idea. Because when you look at the way the ISACs do it, they share great intelligence, and this is not a competition thing. Let's say I'm a member of the financial sector ISAC. I have to decide that I'm going to share something. Then I have to package it up. I have to ship it up to the FSISAC SOC. They process it, redistribute it out to all the members, and then those members have to read it, decide that it's important on their networks or not, and then do something with the information. It's all great intelligence, but it's pretty inefficient.
Sorry to interrupt, but go back just a couple sentences ago when you were saying if this is successful, the CEOs hope that all of you will be finding enough information real time to do what? You had said something. I just want to make sure I got that sentence.
It's that we could share the controls necessary to block all adversary campaigns in real time.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so whenever we find something new, it's going to be automatically transmitted to all the members so that they can deploy it in their product set. Okay, that's a powerful idea. What do you think?
What I like it is it's we have to find a way to scale security because we don't have enough people that are qualified and trained to. We can't scale people for this problem. So what it's interesting is that you're trying to put a way to scale security, and I think that's absolutely what's needed.
Yeah, I think so too. And so we're taking all that kind of bother that humans have to do with the ISAC model, where they have to analyze and decide what they're going to do with it. And the vendors are going to decide how to best put those controls into their own products, okay, without the customer, without the organization having to do it themselves. All right, so this sounds really lofty. And, we were in there briefing the CEOs, and I'm in there with my, Superman cape on. I'm going to save the internet speech. And just what I told you. And they called us on it. They said, oh, you guys think you're going to be able to do that? We'll prove it for one. Take one adversary campaign and see if you all can collectively disrupt that campaign better together than if we're doing it by ourselves. And I give you 90 days to do it. Okay, so we are tasked to come back to them on October 1st and show them how successful we could be on one campaign to see if we could disrupt it. I don't want to give it away yet because we're still working on it. And I was a little leery when we started down the path of, oh no, and maybe put my money where my mouth is. But we picked one campaign and we put our 4 best analysts on it, one from each of the founding members. And in the first 2 weeks, we already have so much intelligence on this one campaign that we're absolutely going to be able to disrupt it. I am hopeful. Okay, I think this is a decent idea. It's already working to some extent. So keep your fingers crossed. I think it has a chance to change the game.
Well, we originally started with artificial intelligence, but I think that this is a way of approaching the problem, which is about scale and it's about
Yeah.
leveraging the might and computing power and the leadership across several organizations, which is infinitely better than having a bunch of mini warriors running around. So this is great.
I think so too. So wish me luck.
I will. Maybe in October we can talk again, and you can give the audience a bit of an update on that.
That'd be great.
That'd be fantastic. Question I have that is about security in the media. Mr. Robot, Imitation Game. What thoughts do you have on that? And what did we were talking a little bit earlier. Maybe you can share with the audience your thoughts on it.
Oh, it's one of my pet projects. All my friends, we all sit around with beers in hand and argue endlessly about what the best hacker movies are and what the best hacker TV shows are and what the best hacker books are. In fact, if you go back to the Canon discussion, you'll notice there's a number of novels in that list, right? And the reason there are novels in our Canon list is because we want to encourage young people to join our craft. And the thought is, if you give them a good book with a good thriller or whatever the story is, and the cyber is right, meaning it's not Harry Potter cyber, meaning that the hackers didn't break into the NSA by guessing the password, which is, password. But as long as we don't have those kinds of hacker books out there where they're hacking, whatever the story is true and precise, those are the books we should encourage young people to read, right? So in terms of books, yes, novels should be in there, and we argue about those all the time. Do you have a favorite hacker novel that you like?
Not necessarily, no. Nothing that stands out as something that was a go-to book I'd give to someone.
I'm going to give you one. Here's one you have to tell everybody to read. Okay. It is Cryptonomicon by Neil Stephenson. It is the best hacker novel of all time. He is a fantastic writer. He understands our community better than any of the authors I've ever read. And this book, oh my, okay, it is a serious book. You have to commit to this thing. You are not going to read it over a weekend. It's 1,000 pages, right? And it's dense with ideas, not only hacking stuff and security stuff, but all kinds of stuff. It's multi-generational story, World War II and .com in the 90s, same family, different people, obviously. But it has Alan Turing in it. It has General MacArthur in it. It has General Goerings in it. Okay. So there's crypto analysis, breaking codes at Bletchley Park and in the Pacific Theater. There's a treasure hunt. There is 3 different love stories. And when you get these geeks in the book who are really good at breaking code and you get them in a room with a girl and you watch them, totally freak out, it is quite the thing to see. And like I said, you have to commit to it, but it is the best hacker book of all time in my experience. But I kind of got off track. You were asking about TV shows. So which one do you like?
No. I think that's great. The greatest book of all time. I mean, I love that. And I think the audience is going to appreciate that. Do you have a favorite movie of all time?
Well, it's funny. A friend of mine, Steve Winterfield, he's the information security officer over at Nordstrom. He and I argue about this stuff all the time. And we decided to do a survey to find out what movies everybody likes. And it was hugely scientific. We solicited all of our friends and family, so you might want to question the data a little bit, but we still pushed the survey out, got about 500 people. And what we discovered is it depends on what your generation is, on what your favorite hacker movie is. So I'm kind of an older guy, all right? For my data set, for the people in my age range, the favorite hacker movie is War Games with Matthew Broderick.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
However, next generation down, okay, can you guess what it is? You're probably in that generation. Or are you my age? But
I'm probably more in your age. So yeah, the Matthew Broderick one is definitely something.
Okay, so the one down the list is Hackers, the one with Angelina Jolie in it. Okay, which is an awful movie, by the way, but people seem to like it. And the one underneath them from the younger generation, it is The Matrix. Okay, people like The Matrix more than anything else.
Matrix is a great movie.
It is a great movie. And in fact, they were using, real code, which is fantastic. This year, we had 2 big movies come out that I was very excited for, all right? One was Black Hat, and the other one was The Imitation Game. Did you see either of those?
I didn't see any one of those, no.
Oh, my. Okay, so...
They're good?
No. Wait, Black Hat, no. Not very good at all, okay? It is beautiful, but it's just silly, okay? So I don't recommend it. I would watch it on an airplane ride if you have nothing else to watch, but just because it's kind of fun to see how silly it is. But no, I would not recommend that movie. The one I thought got it right, though, was The Imitation Game. This is the semi-true biography of Alan Turing and the work he did at Bletchley Park during World War II. I say semi-true because, it's a movie and they had to kind of bend the story a little bit to make it compelling. But I thought they captured the essence of who Alan Turing is. He is my all-time computer science hero. And this movie tells his story and why he should be heroic to all of us. And I think they got it exactly right. Do you know much about Alan Turing?
No, but I think I'm going to go out and get this movie.
Yeah, you should absolutely. Now, Benedict Cumberbatch plays him. He's the Sherlock guy, and he's so good at it, and you should absolutely go see it. But let me tell you why Alan Turing is so fantastic. He is a genius, okay? Let's just figure that out right away. He proved mathematically that it was possible to build a computer years before we had the technology to build it. He's the guy that figured out and proved it mathematically, that you can put a set of symbols into a machine and make it do one thing today and put a different set of symbols into it the next day and make it do something completely different. And what do I mean by that? It means that he is the guy that proved that you could right now play World of Warcraft with all of your friends across the world, and then shut that off and bring up a spreadsheet with enough data in it the size of your local library. He's the guy that proved that can be done mathematically, okay? Like 6 or 7 years before we built the first one. So he's a genius. So then he's so smart, and he's he's a puzzle solver. He migrated over to Bletchley Park during World War II to help the British break the German codes. He's the guy that helped build the machine that broke the Enigma encryption machine that the Germans used to send all their message traffic during the war. Enigma is this mechanical machine with lots of dials that the Germans used to encode all their messages. He helped build a machine that broke that code. Okay, so probably reduced World War II by 2 years, probably saved 20 million lives because of the work that he did there. Phenomenal achievement. But it was so secret that only like 3, 4, or 5 people in the world knew what they were doing. What they were doing at Bletchley Park, that no one knew the work that he did. And after the war, he got into trouble, and this is Shakespearean in its tragedy, because Alan Turing was gay, and no one knows for sure because I didn't know what to call it back then, but he was probably autistic, at least on the autistic spectrum.
Like Asperger or something like that.
Like Asperger, yeah, like most of us are, okay. So he got caught in UK with a gay lover, and back then it was illegal to be gay. So when he went to trial, the judge gave him a choice. He could either go to jail for a couple of years or take chemical castration regimen that was designed to reduce his gay sexual libido, which is just crazy. And because of the work he did at Bletchley Park was so secret, nobody knew he was even on trial, and no one came forward to say, you can't touch this guy because he's a national hero. So he starts to take these chemical castration drugs, and it starts to affect his mind. And within a couple of years, he commits suicide. Right? And he was young. He was 40-ish when he died. Just think of what he could have done if we had left him alone. I mean, it's a huge tragedy, not only for him and his family, but for the nation and the world, really. I really believe that. And even under his chemical regimen, he was still able to develop the artificial intelligence test that we still use today to decide if a computer is sentient. There's a lot of controversy in his test. Have you heard of this test? It's called the Turing test. Have you heard of this before?
No, I haven't. I'm fascinated, though.
All right, so it is, you put a man behind a screen in front of a terminal, and the man or the woman asks questions to the computer screen, and whatever answers he gets back, he needs to decide if it's human or a computer giving those answers, right? And if he thinks that the computer is really human, then that is artificial intelligence. There's been huge discussions about what artificial intelligence is, way past what Alan Turing did back then, and there are more complicated measures of artificial intelligence these days. But in any conversation that comes up, everybody cites Alan Turing as the first guy to really think about that. And he invented that test called the Imitation Game, okay, in a paper that you can download from the internet if you want to read it. It's pretty simple, right? when he was under the influence of those chemical castration drugs. So really, amazing guy. He's my hero of all time. And you should see the movie just because of that.
Absolutely. No, this is great. I'm fascinated. This is the kind of stuff I love. Just two final questions for you. One, so stress management for the guys that are at the top of the security roles in their organizations. What do you recommend personally the guys, ladies do to reduce stress on the job so that they live longer, healthier lives?
It's a great question. First, I think you need to love this. If you don't love it, you should go do something else. Okay, so that'd be one. The second thing is, I think you have to have a hierarchy of needs established for your own personal regimen. And what I mean by that is you absolutely have to take care of yourself first. Then you can take care of your family and then worry about your job. Right? And if you kind of layer all those things together, and you're making sure that you are exercising and eating right, make time to do those things, right? Because most of us do not. We can always do one more email message or take one more phone call or, complete one more PowerPoint deck. But if you do not build the time in to do exercise and take care of yourself, you're not going to last long in this field. So that's what I would recommend.
Yeah, that's wise advice, and appreciate that. So final question for you. If you could put a billboard up at every major city, sort of the way Barracuda does, but it doesn't have to be Barracuda, in every airport, every major city, it could be a billboard in a public spot that it had a personal message. It could be, if you wanted to, maybe Palo Alto would sponsor it too. You can put their logo on the bottom right or something, but fundamentally it's a Rick message. What would you say on that billboard?
Can I do a security one and then a personal one? I got two.
Absolutely, yeah.
So the security one that I think everybody needs to realize is that threat prevention is not only possible, but you should absolutely be doing it. And I say that because we've kind of gotten away from that. What's happened in the last 10 years is vendors have decided that it's too hard to prevent bad guys from getting in your network. And so they have provided us detection tools and mitigation tools. And I think that's absolutely the wrong way to approach it. You need to do detection and mitigation. I'm not saying you don't need to do them, but I'm saying I will not cede the ground from prevention. I can prevent 95% of the stuff that's out there because we already know about it, right? And then for the 5% that I don't know about, you need detection and mitigation. So that's the message. Threat prevention is a thing that you should be worried about.
Great.
That's one.
Okay.
For the personal side, I'm going to choose. I might want to do two of these, right? The first one is just tolerance. Okay, this community of security vendors, the security community of people. We are made up of all kinds of personalities and colors and thoughts and political beliefs, and I really don't care about any of that. Okay, being tolerant of that person down the hallway for how crazy he is, I think it's fundamental to how we all secure the internet. And I know it sounds kind of Pollyanna, but I believe that is the thing we need to do. All right. And if I want to throw one more thing on that is we all need to bring the women into this conversation. All right. Because we're excluding half of the brains on the planet, and those people are absolutely need to be in our community. I've had lots of great women work for me in my career, and in every place I've ever gone, they've always been exponentially better than any of the men I've had. And it just kills me that we exclude them in our workforce. So tolerance, bring the women in, and I think the world is a better place.
I love the way you answered that final one, and the first one too on the business side, but on the personal side was great. The tolerance and the women. Actually, the women that I know in the IT arena are actually the most powerful leaders that I've run into. I don't know what it is, but they're just they're great leaders, and you're absolutely right. They need to be brought into the security fold.
They've had to be because we treat them so badly. Okay, that the ones that have succeeded are so much better than the rest of us, right? Because they've had to be, right? And I'm saying there's room for all of us in here, so let's get them in here.
Well, Rick, I appreciate you for spending the time on the show. This has been a blast. And where can people learn more about you as we wrap up?
You can follow me on Twitter. RaceBandon99 is my handle. That's an old Johnny Quest reference for you old timers out there. You can find the Cybersecurity Canon at the Palo Alto Network's webpage. Just look up Palo Alto and Canon and you will get there. We're looking for help on that project, so we're looking to I think there needs to be about 100 books in the candidate list at any given time. There's about 25 there now, and we accept book reviews from anybody. So if you have a passion book that you love, write the book review and submit it. You can find me there, and I think that's about it. Oh, you can visit my personal web page on my own blog if you like. It's TerrorBrate. Look up Howard and TerrorBrate, you'll find it. It's mostly book reviews.
I'm going to put the links up on the show notes for all of the resources we talked about today. So plus how to reach you on Twitter as well. So thanks, Rick, for your time.
Thanks for having me, Bill, and thanks for hounding me to do this. I think you're doing something great here. I love the show, and I wish you success with it.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you. There you have it. That's my interview with Rick Howard. I really felt like Rick came loaded for this interview, kind of like he was came with 2 or 3 shotguns, just firing it on every topic. So it was a lot of fun in talking with him. And if you enjoyed it, please go to iTunes and leave your comments there. It's really important for the show and my team to get your feedback, because I want to continue to grow the show and bring in the very best leaders that I can find in the world related to business IT leadership and to innovative ideas that you'll get inspired by. So with that, until the next episode, have a great day. So there you have it. This wraps another episode of Bill Murphy's Red Zone podcast. To get all the relevant show notes, please go to our blog at www.redzonetech.net/podcast. Additionally, make sure you go to iTunes and leave your comments in iTunes about the show. This helps our show rankings enormously, and it helps support the show. Until next time, I appreciate you very much for listening. Thank you.